Now, I'm a journalist, so we tend to simplify things. So my sort of journalistic translation of this is basically ensuring that we get the right medicines to the right patients at the right time, at the right dose, and at the right price and in the right way. That's hopefully addressing the sort of economic and ethical dimensions of what we want to talk about. Obviously, this is a very complex, multi-dimensional kind of a problem. No one entity, no one kind of discipline, be it a sociological or a scientific one or a technological one, can actually address this. It's a very holistic, comprehensive, sort of a systems-based aspiration, possibly a reality in certain instances. We'll maybe find out about that this afternoon. But our panel of speakers, therefore, similarly reflects the sort of multiple dimensions that have to be addressed here in order to even come close to realizing the sort of vision that this is kind of that is implied in this. Our first speaker is Stéphane Slizon. He is the Director of Strategy at IMS Health, which is the healthcare information services company that many of us rely on to understand the healthcare market. Stéphane is a thought leader in areas like forecasting and strategic analysis as applied to the healthcare market. So Stéphane, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Bonjour à tous.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, Cormac, and thank you, BIOVISION. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to be, well, to have the easiest job, as Cormac was saying, basically. So I'm there to ask questions and to be a bit irresponsible and not necessarily give any answers, really. So that's going to be for the second part of this session. Now, as a member of IMS Health, I've chosen to deal with this problem, which is multifaceted and very general and very diverse. I've chosen one perspective, which is a very original perspective for someone from IMS Health, which is the perspective of data. Now, can I have my slides, please? Data, which in my opinion is a sign of the dawning of a new era. So I think we are at the dawn of a new era, because things are really moving forward quicker and quicker, particularly in terms of technology. Very simply put, what we're seeing now appear on the market, in addition to certain initiatives which have been implemented in the past by people like Google, web interfaces, where we could enter information on the web. Now we're entering a new area, which is bringing about a completely different context, because the dinosaurs in the sector, Apple, Samsung particularly, they want to bring technology to the field of health, and this is through different platforms, and they want to do it in a coordinated manner. So there are certain signs of this, very clear signs of this. This is the Apple initiative with Epic, which is a system supplier for medical practices, particularly to manage patient files, electronic patient files. But this is joined up with the Mayo Clinic, which ensures that the information collected is valuable information and can, in fact, play a role in clinical decision-making. But also we can see a link up with other insurance companies, such as Cigna, which is the case of Samsung, and also you can see a link up with Apple in this sector. So this is an important development, and this is something which is radically different, and this is what Cormac was saying. This should enable us to provide better care to patients at a better time, at the right dose, etc., etc. So the idea is to have a patient-centric approach, and the patient-centric approach is going to be completely different now. So everything to do with, or everything which precedes treatment, for example, this includes data related to biomarkers, but not only that, data which are very vast and wide-ranging today, which can be coordinated with the patient and can be dealt with and processed through algorithms to have a better diagnosis, and also to have a better selection, if you like, a better selection of the treatment to be given to that patient. But also then afterwards, if this wasn't enough, you have follow-up of the patient as well, and companion through this health platform, which monitors the patient, which tracks the patient, which measures certain constant values. And in other words, we're no longer dependent on the consultation appointments that we have with our doctors, but we are given appointments when certain signals are triggered. For example, warning signals are triggered, and this will give rise to a consultation with physicians in plural, because it's a lot more coordinated, it's a lot more integrated, it's more connected health system, if you like. And the very arrival of these algorithms to deliver value in the health care system is a major development, which does actually pose certain questions, which are questions based on the theme that we wanted to deal with this afternoon. So first of all, the ethical issues related to this. So who owns this data? Who has this data? Who has the right to access this data? And with what approvals, what authorizations, what permits? And another critical element for the system to be able to evolve and to work properly, because the trust that the patient has in the procedures which are implemented is absolutely essential for this to work. So we need the patients to buy into this if the system is to work. The second theme, which is very important, which is the legal and regulatory theme. So from a regulatory point of view, we might wonder how we're going to be able to deal with this value which is delivered to the patients, whether it be from a treatment and therapy point of view or the follow-up given to the patient. So who's going to pay and how? So at the end of the day, an algorithm, can it be assimilated to, for example, a diagnosis tool or a scanner, for example, for which the medical practice would normally invest and which would be invoiced when the patient uses it, for example, or is it going to be based on a click and use system or another type of system? How will we organize all of this so that we can care for the patients? Who's going to pay for it? Are we going to actually pay the cost of the act itself, or is it dependent on the pathology of the patient? Obviously, this may vary between a patient who has cancer or a diabetic patient or an asthma patient, for example. So this is an issue which is raised from a regulatory point of view into the payers. Who's going to pay for it? And at the other end of the scale, from an economic point of view, we have another issue, which is that of the business model to be used. So what business model will be used by the firms using this type of business, particularly for pharmaceutical companies? So a drug, what's it worth in future in addition to an algorithm? If you couple a drug up with an algorithm, should you create alliances in this respect? Should you head for alliances? And some people have already concluded on this. This is the case of Novartis with Google. Everybody has seen that example with the device to measure blood sugar levels. So all of this is going to completely disrupt or create some major upheavals in medical practice, but also major upheavals in all of the industries which focus on this and work around this medical practice. So to conclude, I might say that today we're really seeing the first signs of changes, but all of the factors are already present for this change to be taking place. And I think we can imagine some deep-rooted and sustainable, but even quick changes in this field. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stefan. Any questions from the floor for Stefan? No? I just have one myself. We all know, even as IT consumers using the internet, Facebook, whatever, that the IT vendors or the internet companies are very successful at building, holding, and maybe even controlling consumer relationships. As companies like Google move into healthcare, given their ability to sort of create these sticky applications and to create kind of very long-reaching strategies, might they become dominant players that will actually sort of own the customer, and will the pharma guys be sort of relegated to a sort of a service provider into the system?
Oui, c'est très juste. C'est effectivement.
Well, yes, this is a very interesting question. This is a risk, but at the same time, if they have this privileged relationship with the patient, don't forget that the patient has other relations through forums, through communities of patients, etc., etc. So I think we have to stop thinking in terms of a unimodal relationship. Who is the player who's going to be closest to the patient? No, that doesn't exist. There are several stakeholders, multiple players, and multiple players are going to be in contact with the patient, and obviously we have to coordinate the approach.
And I think that leads very nicely into our next speaker. Thank you, Stefan. You can resume your seat. Our next speaker, I think, probably looks at this more from the point of view of the individual rather than the system. Bertha Maria Knoppers holds the Canada Research Chair in Law and Medicine. She's Director of the Centre of Genomics and Policy at McGill University in Toronto. She's written extensively about the ethical and legal dimensions of genetics, genomics and biotechnology. She's many, many achievements in academia and in global policy development, which I couldn't possibly list here. But she has, just for your interest, chaired the International Ethics Committee of the Human Genome Organization and was a member of UNESCO's International Bioethics Committee, which drafted the Universal Declaration on the Human Genome and Human Rights. Bertha, the floor is yours.
Thank you and good afternoon. Is it working? I'd like to do something completely different. When someone hears that you're going to talk about ethics, they always get scared and think about ethics committees and no and no. And the Global Alliance for Genomics and Health, which is a bottoms-up voluntary association of clinicians, researchers, policymakers, IT geeks, and so on, is trying to go from the global data that we heard about yesterday morning and then the smart data that we heard to responsible data sharing in order to facilitate sharing of data in collaborative international endeavors. So we've taken a completely different approach. Traditionally, ethics has been very protective. It sees research with what I call the sort of Nuremberg filter, that is the researcher's obligation to overcome the presumption that they might harm research participants or patients. So we have developed in the Global Alliance a different approach. We've decided to resurrect an article that has lain largely dormant since 1948 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. This article was taken up again in 1966 in an international convention on economic, social, and cultural rights and was ratified by 166 countries. Why is this important? If you ratify a convention, it is politically, legally actionable. So what does this Article 27 say? Well, it has two basic fundamental rights enshrined in one article, twin rights. One, the right of citizens, of everyone, to share in scientific advancement and its benefits. So that's a right of citizens, every citizen. And the protection of the moral and material interests resulting from scientific production. This means that if you do share data, if you are open source, if you do build infrastructures, scientific infrastructures, that doesn't mean that you do not get proper attribution or recognition for your scientific and your intellectual input. So this is what this framework aims to do, to take a completely different approach to advancing science, but also allowing citizens to benefit and scientists to be recognized. So the next slide, please. Oh, it seems to be stuck. Oh, it's translated, I forgot to say, it's 7 languages. Actually, as of yesterday, 8 in addition to English, Japanese, Arabic, Chinese, and so on. In order that this simple framework, which has all kinds of policies that go with it, will be usable in a user-friendly sense for citizens around the world. Now, what's interesting about the framework is that it moves data sharing not only from around the global level, but down to subpopulations. It supports what we call projects on, that will stratify from the population level to the subpopulation. Why is this important? Because stratification of all this data into subpopulations of healthy individuals or resistant or susceptible or super transmitters or whatever is very important for the sustainability of universal healthcare systems like you have in France, like we have in Canada. And here we have an illustration of a project, international project with over 65 studies from 30 countries. What stands in the way or what is difficult? Why do we need the Global Alliance? Actually, as a co-lead of this project, it's a Canadian project, out of a 3-year funded project, it took us a year to get ethics approvals, to get through all the interinstitutional agreements and everything else. This is not the way to be efficient, economical, and ethical when you're trying to do international research that involves data sharing. So we have a real challenge here to somehow build a system of what I call mutual ethical recognition between countries. If your system meets certain criteria and your ethics review process meets certain criteria, why shouldn't Germany recognize a project that has such approval in France or Brazil or Vietnam and so on? If we go from populations then to subpopulations for stratification, for sustainability of healthcare systems that allows us to target where we put our money, we also, and this ties in exactly with the speaker before me, start integrating data sharing across healthcare institutions, offices, and systems. And this means that we can build platforms for infrastructure science at the level of the patient, where the patient, through repeated contributions of data or of samples, can in fact become their own control over time, and in that way receive better, again, more customized and targeted, individualized healthcare. So we move the whole data sharing down to the healthcare system. I think this is going to be our greatest challenge. Data stewards tend to become data custodians and sit on their data. And finally, we have this movement, this whole do-it-yourself. This is the participatory part of the 4 Ps we heard yesterday. And I would add the populational at the beginning and add a 5th P. But at the personal level, we now know that citizen advocates, patient advocates are arguing in favor of a do-it-yourself kind of genetic quest, if you like, by sending in spit samples and getting their, in quotes, clinical readout of their genetic futures. Now, I think self-help is a great idea. I'm a bit skeptical about the quality of self-reported health data, but I think it's important that patients are activated, are partners, and in that sense it really is participatory. But I think we need to frame this in a way that we ensure the quality of the data that comes from such endeavors. So, what is then the message for the future? Infrastructure science, as I call it, is or should go hand in hand with discovery science. In other words, we have to recognize that data sharing, quality of data, facilitating across countries and across legal and ethical policies and laws, that we actually have a carrot in a certain sense in terms of what we contribute to the system, but there is no stick. It is simply an acceptance and a will and a vision that this is the science of tomorrow, to have quality data sharing. So there is no stick, but I do have 2 of these very friendly dogs that might come after you if you don't share your data. Thank you.
Thank you, Bertha Maria. Any questions out there at this point for Bertha Maria? No? I do have one myself. And it's a general theme that I think when you start looking at this kind of brave future that we're all looking at, I'm always concerned about disparities. There are different kind of economic pressures that are pushing for the realization of this future, in part because some people hope to make money out of it, obviously. Europe, mainland Europe, sadly not necessarily Ireland where I come from, but mainland Europe certainly believes in universal healthcare coverage, or does its level best to ensure it. North America is making some progress in that area, or at least I should say the USA, but in general they've been quite comfortable with massive healthcare disparities. As we move to this, can a rights-based approach really be foregrounded in all of this? Or would you have concerns that this might be implemented in ways that might actually just drive further inequalities into the system?
Actually, it's, I think, the first time that we've conceived of data sharing, a responsible data sharing, as a human right. And the 166 countries include many countries who don't have universal health care, but could, if they had access to the data sets that are sufficiently global, so these large international projects are involving quite a number of countries, no matter what disease area you're interested in. I think by making that data available, it's preemptive, it's pre-competitive, and even perhaps phase 1 trials should enter into that space. We heard about that yesterday, a little bit of collaboration between the different companies to make that data universally available. So it doesn't matter if you're in Brazil or in France.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.